If you want to see how we make all of our leak-proof epoxy molds for all of our epoxy work, stick with us and we'll show you how we do it. G'day guys, Kieran here from KJH Woodworking and welcome back to our channel. Today we're going to go through how to make an epoxy mold for anything. So I have to make a serving board for a Christmas present, but I use the same technique for whether it's a coaster, serving board, or a tabletop. So we'll go through it step by step in detail of exactly what I do and how I go about it, starting with measuring up the board, cutting the boards, going through how we assemble it, what tape we use. We're going to try two different types of tape. So we've got a tuck tape at 30 bucks a roll and just a packaging tape at $4 a roll. So stick around to the end of the video because that will show you the results and I think you'll be surprised. And then we'll go through how I go about corking it and assembling it, everything start to finish, as well as a quick montage of the project I do, and then we'll pull it all apart and you can see how the tapes perform. If you want to see that, let's get stuck into it. Okay, let's talk about the board we use. So I like to use a melamine because it's dead flat and that has a smooth surface, but you can use any sheet good because we're covering it with tape anyway, which is the non-stick surface. But we're gonna make ours out of melamine because I've got it and it's a good product to use. Things to keep in mind, you wanna make your mold slightly bigger than the finished product. So my project is gonna end up being 800 long by 280 deep wide. So I will make this 810 by 290 because that allows a little bit of waste to cut off when we square everything up in the finishing process. Also, when you're making your height, you also want to allow a little bit extra because you want to overfill the mold, or sorry, overfill the epoxy slightly so that you can get the finished depth you want. So again, I'm making mine 25 mil, so I'm going to make my mold 35 mil high. So then by the time I've planed and sanded and everything, I end up with my 25 mil. So let's mark this up and get stuck in ripping all the parts down and then we'll go from there. Okay, so we've got everything cut now. Now let's talk tape. I've got tuck tape, 30 bucks a roll. Packaging tape, about 4 bucks a roll. Both may work, but I've used both before, so I know what happens, but I'm gonna give it a go anyway and do half and half. So normally you wouldn't split this, but I'm just gonna measure in center and I'm roughly gonna go half tuck tape, half packaging tape, and then we will see which performs better. Or if they perform exactly the same and you can save yourself a heap of money on only using packaging tape, but stick with us and I'll show you which one works better. Okay, so we've got all of that taped up. Now time for assembly. So I like to use panhead screws of any sort. I find it easiest to use pocket screws. I know they're more expensive, but I get to reuse them anyway. So I just keep going back in and then whenever I need a pocket screw, I still use the same screws. But any screw will do. All you're doing is pulling this in tight together. Just make sure you screw it, not nailing it. Just makes it so much easier to pull it all apart. Roughly speaking, 150 to 200 mil apart, the whole perimeter. And a mandatory requirement is to toss your screws for dramatic effect before you screw it together. Okay, so we have that now all assembled. Next bit is to cork. I like to use acrylic gap filler, particularly in black. Really easy to see that you've got it everywhere, particularly if you're using the clear tape. So black gap filler, you can use silicone. I just find black gap filler easier to work with than silicone because it's water-based. You can clean it up with water. So much nicer to work with. So we get to corking that. The other thing I like to do is smooth it over. Most people use a paddle pop stick or their finger. I actually use a fondant roller. So in a former life, I was a baker. So fondant roller was in the house. I'm like, hey, this might work. So what I do, use the fondant roller, which is basically a ball on a stick. I just use it to press the corners in. And then so it'll smush out any of the excess cork. And then once it's dried, I just peel that excess cork off and we're good to pour. So let's go ahead, cork this up and we'll smooth it over and we'll let it dry. So biggest thing with letting it dry is this is a 20-minute dry time. 20 minutes means that it skins over at 20 minutes so you can paint it. Does not mean the cork is dry. So wait at least 10 hours, 10 to 12 hours before pouring your epoxy. Otherwise, it's just gonna eat through that wet cork and seep out the bottom. So make sure you wait until it's completely dry all the way through. 20 minutes is dry for painting, not for pouring epoxy. Keep that in mind. Okay, so you've let your cork dry for about 12 hours or so. I like to do it the day before and then pour the next day. But 12 hours seems to be sufficient. Time to apply a mold release. There's three types that I know of. You've got a paste-based, water, or sorry, liquid. It's not water, but liquid or aerosol. I haven't been able to find the aerosol in Australia, but that seems to be the easiest and everyone's go-to. So if you know where to get it in Australia, leave a comment below and do me a favor and give me a hand with that one. But my go-to is your paste-based mold release, basically because it's a wipe on, wipe off. So let's crack this open and apply it, and then we'll get stuck into pouring the epoxy. I am not liable for your dental work. Nah, who am I kidding? Don't use your teeth. Okay, maybe the teeth was the way to go. The key here is follow the directions of your specific release. So mine is a buff on, wait 5 minutes, buff off. So I'm gonna do exactly that. But it might be a buff on, wait 20 minutes, might be a leave dry completely. Follow the directions. I can't stress that enough. Exact same as epoxy. If you don't follow the directions, it's not gonna work. Stick to the directions of what you're using because it might not be the same as what I'm using. Okay, that brings us to mold prepared, all done. So ready for epoxy. So I'm gonna quickly whip through that. So cue the montage. So it's been 5 days. This is now dry. Let's take the screws out and bust this apart and see which tape performs better. Before I do that, check out the bottom. No red, didn't leak, leak-proof mold. As you can see, no issue with either tape. Why spend 30 bucks a roll when you can spend 4? Your call. Okay guys, so that is a wrap on this one. That is how I go ahead and make a epoxy mold for anything. So this was for a serving platter, works exactly the same process for a tabletop, just on a larger scale. So that's how I go ahead and do it. As you can see, the packaging tape works just as well as the tuck tape. As much as I love tuck tape and I've used it for years, packaging tape just as good. Just buy a decent quality packaging tape and you won't have any problem. And you can buy it off the shelf where tuck tape you can't. So works just the same and significantly cheaper. So if you like this video, hit the thumbs up. Otherwise, I will see you on the next one. Cheers guys, thank you.